Every once in a while, a story hits Wall Street that just sends shockwaves through the entire market. Well, today, we're talking about the biggest one of the year, the absolutely massive public debut of a company called Medline. Just take a second to look at that number, $6.26 billion. And get this, that's not the company's net worth, it's not their annual revenue, no, that's how much cash they raised from investors in a single day.
And yeah, that officially makes Medline's debut on the Nasdaq the single biggest IPO of the entire year. It's a huge deal, for sure. But the story gets really interesting when you find out who this company actually is.
So who is the company behind these absolutely record-shattering numbers? Well, this is the fun part. It's Medline, and they might just be the biggest, most influential company that you've never, ever heard of. You know, I think the company's own CEO, Jim Boyle, said it best. This quote just nails it. It's this weird paradox, right? They have this immense scale, but almost zero public recognition. So what does he mean, everywhere? Well, this is what everywhere looks like. We're talking about a company that makes something like 335,000 different products. Think about that. From the gloves a surgeon wears to the wheelchair you see in a hospital hallway, there's a really good chance Medline made it. They're in over 100 countries, pulling in $25.5 billion in sales last year alone. They really are the invisible engine of the global healthcare system. Okay, but how does a hidden giant like this suddenly just explode onto the public scene? Well, to get that, we actually have to rewind the clock a few years. See, this IPO, it wasn't the beginning of the story. It was really Act 2. So back in 2021, a whole bunch of huge private equity firms got together and bought Medline for a jaw-dropping $34 billion. It was one of the biggest deals of its kind we'd seen in years. Now, flash forward to today, and those same firms are the ones taking Medline public, looking to cash in. But that first deal, it wasn't just a straightforward purchase. It was what's known as a leveraged buyout, or an LBO. The simplest way to think about it is this. It's like using a massive mortgage to buy a company. But here's the twist. The buyers, the private equity firms, aren't the ones on the hook for that mortgage. The company they just bought, in this case Medline, is now responsible for paying off all that borrowed money. And that debt? It's a really important piece of the puzzle here. All right, let's zoom out for a second. An IPO this big isn't just a story about one company. It's kind of like a bellwether. It tells you a lot about the mood, the confidence, and the overall health of the entire financial market. It's like we're taking the market's pulse. And just to give you some perspective, while it's not topping the absolutely historic IPO from Rivian back in 2021, Medline's debut is easily the biggest one we've seen in a long time. It pretty much dwarfs everything else that's hit the market recently. You know, this success isn't just happening in a bubble. It's really the big exclamation point on what's been a really strong year for IPOs, with over 200 companies going public. And for investors, when you see a strong finish like this, it builds a ton of confidence and optimism for the year ahead. But of course, going public isn't just one big party. For Medline, stepping into the spotlight means all of its problems are suddenly under a microscope for everyone to see. And this hidden giant, well, it's facing some pretty serious headwinds. The road ahead is really a huge balancing act. On one hand, you have this amazing opportunity. The CEO talks about wanting to amplify their voice and finally get some public recognition. But on the other hand, you have the massive challenge of dealing with all that debt from the buyout while trying to navigate some really tricky global trade issues. And that's where the numbers get pretty scary. Medline is carrying a debt load of almost $17 billion. That's a huge number. At the same time, because so much of their manufacturing happens in Asia, they're looking at trade tariffs potentially wiping out up to $200 million from their income next year. That is a serious 1-2 punch for any company. Which brings us to the big, multi-billion-dollar question. Medline has made history, but now that it's not hidden anymore, now that its books are wide open for all of Wall Street to see, can this giant actually manage its massive debt and live up to the hype? The answer to that is probably going to be one of the biggest business stories we follow all year.